Language is culture. And when you grow up and you have a lot of cultures that are a part of you, you end up realizing that there are also a lot of truths. And there are a lot of different perspectives on how to see one thing. Let me explain. I come from two countries that no longer exist. That is former Yugoslavia and former South Yemen. Today, I'm very proud to say that I'm from Bosnia and from Yemen. I grew up in a household full of languages. I didn't say my first word until I was 4, because I couldn't decide what language I wanted to speak in. And I also think that I couldn't decide what perspective I wanted to see the world in. My family and I ended up going to the United States. We were naturalized, we became citizens, and I was educated there. So I would say that I'm an American, and I call it home. 5 years ago, I moved across the Atlantic to Morocco. I was working as the director of operations for an art festival, creative. I had an apartment, I had a moped. It was great. But I felt depressed and I couldn't figure out why. And it all came together when I was coming into a meeting with my colleagues. And before I would come into these meetings, every time I would get more and more nervous. I would propose ideas and they were always turned down. And I thought, maybe I'm just not passionate enough about how I'm saying it. And finally, somebody turned to me and said, Alia, you're being too aggressive. You are in charge of production. You are not here to bring ideas. You are here to implement them. That's the other department. What the hell am I doing here? But I knew what I was doing there. That was my choice being there. Comfort. I gave up 2 years to communicate with people through Skype, email, and texts. To sit in an office to organize this. I was going to see it through. I saw it through. The festival was a great success, but it produced an opportunity for me to really make a decision. I gave myself a time limit, 100 days. I would have 100 days. I would go around the world. I would use image to communicate on a very, very low, uncomfortable budget. And that was one of the goals. I wanted to make myself and put myself in uncomfortable positions because I never wanted to be afraid of being uncomfortable again. Where to start? I wanted to look at one of the images, which I'll share with you right now, that has been one of my favorite images for as long as I could remember. It's a map with no borders, only land and water. I looked at the places that I had been, that I had lived, that I had visited, and then I mapped out the places that I'd like to go. What next? The first place that I went to was Tanzania. A lot of people go here for safari, but I wanted to go even farther. I wanted to go to the other direction, to Pemba. One thing that I knew about Pemba was that one of my heroes, Zheng He, who was a Muslim traveler, this was the farthest that he reached from China. So it was a place that I was going to start. And what did they trade? Spice. Something I was so familiar with in my food, rice, tea, something that I use all the time. In fact, I'd say that from my friends, I'm probably one of the most well-versed in spice. This is Nurul. Nurul and I did not get along at the beginning. He's quite a conservative Muslim. But soon enough, we got comfortable with each other. And if it wasn't for Nurul, I wouldn't see what I did see. He showed me the clove. It's the most valuable spice that's found on Pemba. The clove was like something that I'd never seen, something brown, something dry, something rugged. It was actually very imperial. It was owned by the government, and if you tried to smuggle it out, you would get 10 years. Value, it's relative. But the one thing that made me really excited, and the one thing that I loved, was the cardamom pod. It was like I'd never seen it. And it made me realize that what we think we know, we actually don't know about. Anything that you know, there's more to know about it. The cardamom is also a flower, it's a plant, and it's something that can be used in tea, in rice. It too has value. And finally, something that might be a little bit more common to you is the pineapple. And so during my trip in Zanzibar and to Pemba, I saw many things. I visited places, I visited people, I saw narcotics anonymous groups, I saw people who were in the streets. It wasn't beaches. There was a lot more to it than meets the eye. And this is what I'm trying to share with you is what is beautiful out there, because everything I came across was ugly. And as we know, there's enough news and enough media out there to tell us what's ugly. The next place I decided to go was Bishkek. In fact, I was going to Mongolia, and one of the places that was along the way was FRU. I had 24 hours in an airport called FRU. And I thought, I don't need a visa for this place. Let me look at it. Sure enough, I looked at Google Images and I found Bishkek. I decided to stay for 2 weeks. It's an amazing place of fusion. It's Muslim. It has a history, though, of communism. Its languages were itself different. They used Cyrillic there. And this is also something that was interesting for me. I wanted to immerse myself in places where I also could not understand. I also could not read the language. Every letter is a symbol. And when you put these symbols together, they create an image. I just wanted to see images. And in fact, I did. And one of the people who I met here was a friend of a friend. The first thing he said was, we need to go and try some Kyrgyz food, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks. What's happening here are the World Nomad Games, the first ever. There are going to be countries from here, Mongolia, Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and of course us, Kyrgyzstan. My favorite game is going to be played there, and it's Buzkazi. Let me explain to you how he explained it to me. It's the origins of polo. Imagine rugby on horseback, where the ball, a sheep corpse, with the heads and legs cut off, sewn, and then passed to each other, their two teams, until they scored into a goal. Imagine this. Okay, sounds brute. Dare I say savage? Buzkazi. That was, of course, Kyrgyzstan that scored. And what made me realize was that looking at this, I expected to see masculinity. I'm in it to see this courage, but savagery and power. But what these men taught me was you can also have grace. That in fact within us, we have both masculine qualities and feminine qualities. And we have to embrace both. The next stop was a place I had longed to go for years, and it was Mongolia. I arrived at the very cosmopolitan Ulaanbaatar, but I didn't want to see this. I went further. It's interesting because when you go that far, you also end up finding a lot of interesting people who make it that far. And so I met 3 incredible other travelers who had seen much more than I have. And I knew that I could learn from them. And so we decided to get a Russian Jeep and travel across the eastern steppe, where Genghis Khan came from, Dadal. This is the highway. And so for about 21 days, and our mission was to go and see the migration of swans and the migration of gazelle. But what we realized together was that we actually never really saw them. But this is everything that we saw in between. Wild horses everywhere. One morning we woke up and this wonderful man came out of nowhere. And when he came, he got off. We offered him a biscuit and tea. He got back on, and with gestures I asked if I could photograph him. And I realized at this moment, I am so damn happy. Because I'm photographing a cowboy. Not just any cowboy, but somebody who doesn't really have anything, but is happy the way he is. And this is what Mongolia taught me. We would be in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly we'd fall upon a gur. People who lived very simply. It seemed like they didn't have much, but in fact, they had everything. This man was particularly special because I went up to him and he came by and he had binoculars with him. And I said, do you mind if I take a picture of you? You know, your hand binoculars. He said, jump. So I got on the back of his bike and he took me to show me all that he had, his herd. And he was so proud and also made me rethink that all I really needed was what I had at that moment. Mongolia. The next place I went to was Nepal. And I didn't go to Nepal to see the Himalayas. In fact, I went to see the people. And I was in touch with a friend of mine who went to the same college that I went to, Rijlal, and he said, sure, you're coming at the right time. It's Suharaya, otherwise known as Diwali, which is the Festival of Lights. Why don't you come with me? So I went to the village, but on the way, of course, we met some incredible people. And something that's wonderful about Nepal is that they really have understood how to live with their traditions, the old and the new. I also learned here about process. I realized that all of us in the world are in fact the same in our needs. We need food, we need shelter, security, and when these things are met, and even sometimes vanity, and when these things are met, we tend to have the same fulfillment. Needs, fulfillment. So in the one moment that we are all the same, we are equally different, because it's the process in between that makes us absolutely different. Nepalis focus a lot on the process. They take time with the process. And I was going to discover it further. And we discovered Diwali. And Nepal taught me something very special. There's a difference between religious and to be spiritual. I grew up in a Muslim culture. I then went to the United States where there were all cultures, all religions. And somehow I was here and I felt like I was a part of this process, this Hindu ritual. My final destination of this journey was India. I decided to go to Kolkatta because a friend of mine said, you should go to Calcutta. Don't go to Bombay and New Delhi. You have all the rest of your life for this. Calcutta is so misunderstood. And one of the first things that I saw was this image. I decided to photograph it because I was looking at the woman, I was looking at fertile ground. But in fact, when I got closer, I realized that it was a trash mountain. This to me seemed like a place that everything ended. But at the same time, India will surprise you this way. And for those of you who've gone to India, perhaps you can understand that in one moment you are presented with one extreme, and immediately after you are presented with its extreme. Where there's death, there's life. And the process moves on. Where there's one, there's the other. Where there's an end, it's only the beginning. And right after this, I went to one of the most magnificent places, which is the flower market. And I realized these people have worked so hard on creating these amazing decorations, these amazing ornaments. They realize it's going to wilt in a week or less. I personally feel like I have to hold on to things, document them. But for them, they move on. So I think the biggest thing that I've learned from this trip is where there's one, there must be the other. And the trip ended up becoming an infinity sign. 100 days that I experienced, 100 days, is actually what happens in 001 day, every day. The infinity sign, things are always changing. There are two things you cannot control. That is time, and that everything changes. So you might as well be a part of it. And when you come across fear, don't be afraid of it. Don't let it block you. Break it up. Look at all of the elements from different angles. Put it back together and create something new. Thank you.